Okay, so before I can start trimming or working on this rear rear of the front fender, I should say, and I want to be able to establish a nice clean line where, if I was just trimming this piece off, once I put the fender sheet metal up, if I was just trimming it off, it would be easy. I'd just put it up there and then just cut it and then use a grinder to make my door gap. But unfortunately, I have to fold the metal back and then back around and make a flange on the back side of my rear support that I showed you in the last video. So there's no way to get behind there to trace the front edge of this door to make sure that I've got a decent starting point for where I'm going to mark this piece in order to bend it over. I've made this sheet metal overlay, and I've marked it on the back side to trim it to the same profile as the front of the door. So what will happen is I'll take this back off, put my sheet metal up, which that will overlap onto the door. Once that's all fixed where I want it, I'll come back and I'll cleco this panel back onto overlaying the rear side of the front fender, and I'll have trimmed it out so that it matches this the door front edge, and that'll show me where the front edge of the door is after I overlay that panel. So it'll be a number of layers. You've got the door, then you've got the back of the fender, sheet metal overlaying the door, then you have this piece coming back over top of that in order I can scribe, and then I can determine a setback for the front door gap based on what this is going to tell me. Anyway, it sounds a little convoluted, but you'll see what I mean. I'm going to continue along here. I had a good tip from one of the somebody viewing the last video, put a comment in the comment section about newer cars, and they have tight door gaps, and so when you open the door, a lot of times what'll happen is after you paint the vehicle, the door gap is too tight and you'll chip the paint along the front edge. He said if you look at most new cars, that this, and I never realized this, and son of a gun, I took a straight edge and I checked out my wife's new Honda, and it's true. What I'm about to tell you, it's that a lot of times the door is actually not level with the front fender, that the door is actually set back maybe a 32nd or maybe even a 1/16 of an inch below the profile of the front fender, so that it's already, as it opens and swings in, it's already set to clear the back side of the fender. So something I never knew about, but son of a gun, every new car I've laid a straight edge on, that's exactly true. The front edge, or the front of the door skin, is set back. It's not even. I always assume that you want to, when you're bondoing it, you want to block everything together so that you can get that all even. Well, that's kind of a mistake. Most new cars with tight door gaps have this panel slightly set back. It's almost imperceptible. Actually, on a couple of cars, I noticed that it wasn't actually this entire panel. It was just this front edge was kind of rounded over, so that it's already rolled in a little bit, so that when you open the door, it's already headed behind the front fender. Anyway, thought that was interesting. Pass it along. Okay, so you can see this rear section of the front fender. I've got it overlaying over top of the door. So you can see it's over top of the door right there. And now I'm going to get that overlay panel. That's pretty much the idea. Now I'll be able to go and I'll use a scratch-all and scratch a line into here, and then I'll subtract what I need to to create the door gap, and then I'll draw that line, and I'll add a 1/2 inch tape, and then trim it off there, and then I'll fold it back 90 degrees to the panel, and that should get me very, very close to a decent door line. Anyway, that's the idea. Okay, well, this is where it gets just a little bit tricky, you know, just because there's so many things that kind of add up. Now, from this line, which is the door front, the face of the door, I want a door gap of 3/16 of an inch. And when you're using, I've got these pliers made up, they've got a stop on them that's a 1/2 inch. So when I go and bend this over, if I bend it over just 3/16 of an inch, it'll add the thickness of the metal to the bend, so that'll close it up to 1/8 of an inch, which is not what I want. So basically, I have to add the thickness of the metal to the 3/16, which is about it's about a 1/16 of an inch. So I have to go 1/4 inch to this line, to the front of this line, I should say, and then I have to go back a 1/2 inch, so that I'll be bending, once I put my stop in there, I'll be bending on this line. So this is a 1/4 inch away from my front of my door, minus the 1/16 of an inch of metal, which should hopefully give me my 3/16 door opening. Now this is, you know, I'm using these pliers, and, you know, it's not going to be super accurate as far as, you know, neat. I'm going to have to go back and forth with a dolly and neaten it up as I go to try and get the door opening, the door gap, I should say, more consistent as I go along. Anyway, so I have to basically have a 1/2 inch from this line, so I'm going to add a 1/4 inch to the line in this direction, and that's where I'll trim this piece off so that I can go in and I can fold it back. Hopefully, we'll see what happens there. Alright, so here's the piece with the edge. You can see the 1/2 inch flange. Get that to focus. It's a 1/2 inch flange that's bent over all the way up, and as you can see, when I push it in here, it's about 3/16 of an inch, which is what I was looking for as far as that's concerned. It'll close up a little bit, hopefully a little bit more, just a tick more, when this flange is completely flattened around the back side of the rear support. So I'll wait for that to see if I have to smarten it up anywheres, you know, grind off a little bit of metal here and there to try and make that a little bit neater, like in areas like here. I've got a little bit of this is where I added that piece of metal, and it's kind of got a bad transition. I go back in there and add a little bit of metal and grind that off, but you get the idea. And so I've got to get the inner panel back in here and then work it around, and see how that goes. Alright, so I went through a similar process of doing this lower panel, and I have a 2-inch gap here that I'll have to fill in with regular sheet metal, but it worked out pretty good as far as being able to use a 1/4 panel, or partial, what they call a partial 1/4 panel. That's a full 1/4 panel that goes all the way up the sail panel here, seat panel. Partial 1/4 just cuts across here. It's just this lower section. So when I started this project, those are really the only repop pieces of sheet metal you can buy for this car, or for the 71, I should say. But it was most crucial because of this complex shape here. This is really difficult to achieve. So this saved me a ton of time. Yeah, so I'll just have to fit that little piece in there, and that'll be 90% of what I have to do as far as getting it fit up. And then I'll have to take this whole thing off in one piece after I weld it all up. As we know, the welding process is a tedious deal. I have to go across the entire top, down here, through all these features here, around the front, up here, and then of course across these two seams here. And then I'll take it off, and then there's some work that has to be done on the back. Of course, I'll have to hem this over on the back side and put some tacks on the back side to secure that. That's one down, one more fender to go, and then it's on to other bigger projects, the hood being one of them. It's a huge project. I think I'm going to tackle the deck lid area first in the rear pan, get that tidied up before I even go into this, because I still have some thinking to do on this, and so I want to probably have one more video here to add to this of this patch panel in, and then that'll be it. Okay, so that's it with the little patch filled in at the bottom. That was a little bit more complicated than I thought. It turns out that kind of makes a little twist reverse, and then there's a little detail at the bottom here. You see this little sweep up here? Well, looks like I cut it a little bit too soon, so I had to put that little sweep in there, and yeah, it was a little bit more complicated than I thought. So it took a little while, but it's looking okay. Put the rear tires on to kind of get a little bit of a stand back, and again, it's too early of a celebration. I still have to go through all the welding just on this side. I got to take it off. Then I got to hem it over. I got to put it back on the car, and then I have to start on the other side, which, you know, again, it's same process over here, but we'll get there. Anyways, I just thought I'd show you what the whole thing looked like complete. It's kind of hard to see because you got silver and black there, but that's it for now. Okay, so something that almost got overlooked because the front end was blasted off of this car when I got it. So this is the front side marker lights, which I did not have. So I ordered some up, and doing the same thing I did in the rear, making myself a housing that'll fit into this front fender. But also something else that I had to do, that I've been thinking about doing. These angles right here don't really match my profiles, and they don't in the rear also, by the way. So I looked at the drawing to see how Doug had done his rendering, and you can see that these side markers have 3 pockets over here, 3 pockets also in the rear. This one's a little longer, and so I had to come up with a pattern that I could make some sort of an overlay over the lens that would define it to look more like that. So this will be the eventual pattern for a small bezel that'll attach right to the lens, and that will square up the angles and correct it to match the rendering. And I needed to make this right. Now you can see how I had to use this as my furthest extent right here, this point here, to define the width of this thing. So this will be the color of the car, so it really won't stand out as much as you would think. But I need it right now so that I could position this, because if I use this, the optics of having this angle and trying to center this lens up, once I apply this over the top, it might not be in the right position based on just the visual. So I had to make this up right now just to see. Out in the future I'll be making this. I haven't figured out how exactly I want to make this, but it's just going to apply to the lens. Both the front and the rear will get the same treatment, so that these kind of look reminiscent of the original 71 side marker lights. And I'll be using this right now to figure out just where this is going to go on this front part. Well, so there it is with just the side marker light in. Now I'm going to stop the video for a second. I'm going to put the mock-up fascia on that little trim ring, I should say. See how that looks. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with that, because that's a little bit more subtle, a little more subdued. May actually end up narrowing it down a little bit front, top to bottom, as per the rendering. And I'll do the same thing for the rear. It just it makes it neutral to the angles. The one angle to the backside near the wheel opening is not too bad, but the one in the front doesn't match the angle of the front bumper. So having just vertical trim on there like that, it kind of doesn't commit to either angle, so it works better. I like it. Okay, so I went ahead and painted this part of the inside of the fender, and also the inside brace, and so I could weld the two together. So in between the brace and the outer skin has all been painted up, and then I did some fine tuning here on the door gap here, and got rid of the rest of the yellow paint. Just dust coated it with a little bit of the metal etch primer, and it's back up on the car. There's a lot more work that has to go on. Obviously, there's the inner liner that has to be worked out, and also in the back here I'll have to make some sort of an aluminum crush panel to keep debris from going all the way back into that fender where the hinge points are, and it's detailed enough right now to where it's time to I put the bumper back on the front, and I don't know if you remember, but originally I had put some dowel pins in here because I didn't think I'd be able to get my hand in between the fender here to bolt this part of the fender tight up against the bumper. Well, it turns out I got plenty of room in there. I was able to, so I cut the dowel pins off on that side, and I put some capture nuts on the inside of this bumper. So now I've just got some 1/4 bolts that are holding this section, which I like a whole lot better than what I had going on. The guide pins just kept it aligned, but it didn't do anything to pull these two pieces together. But that's what I got going now, so I'm pretty happy with that. And if you forget what I started with, this is what I started with, which is just a 1/4 panel skin. It's a partial skin used for repair. It ends right here, doesn't have the sail panel. What I'll have to do is I'll have to first eliminate this detail over here. I'll have to split it in half right in here. Then this time I'll have to cut this above right over about here, so I end up with this lower section and then this upper section, and then I'll put a piece in here. And then there's a whole ton of work that has to go on here. This has to be cut in a way to reorient this body line, and of course most of this disappears, and this all has to be reshaped and pulled under to conform with the front bumper. This has to be filled in, of course. So a ton of work. Start at the beginning again, but this is the last major body piece on the perimeter of the car below the greenhouse, this being the greenhouse. So after that I'll proceed to hopefully finish up the tail of the car, the trunk lid, and the bumper, and that's in the roll pan. Hopefully I'm going to save the best for last, which is going to be the biggest project, because there's a lot of detail that goes into this hood. It's a lot more complicated than the original rendering that Doug did, which was the blue car. This one has a power bulge in it, and which will make it nice for whoever ends up with this car. If they would decide they want to take the 5.7 out and put in a Hellcat situation, there'll be enough room to get the supercharger in. So I like to have options, as they say. Anyway, that's it for now.